My name is Charlie McGrath. I'm the founder of WideAwakeNews.com and a host on the Rinse Radio Network. We're supposed to believe that 2008 is ancient history. We're not supposed to think about this as leading to the condition of our economy that it's in right now. In fact, if you hear politicians or mainstream media pundits talk about 2008, it's with this afterglow of how we saved the global economy by bailing out these firms and giving the Federal Reserve all this extra power. And anything that's happening now certainly could have anything to do with 2008. It has more likely things to do with Europe, things to do with China, things to do with what's going on in the Middle East, things to do with what's going on with your so-called lazy neighbor next door who walked away from their mortgage or lost their job. We're not supposed to you're not supposed to make the connection between these too big to fail institutions that shouldn't be in existence right now and the present. But the fact is, it's exactly the reason we're in the condition we're in. Are these institutions that should no longer be in existence at best, and at worst they should be public utilities at this point. They brought the country to where it's at right now. They brought the planet to where it's at right now. You know, you could easily just say 2008, $9 trillion in debt. 2012, $16 trillion in national debt. How much money did we spend bailing out these institutions? Well, some estimates have it at a couple trillion. Some have it at scores of trillions of dollars that has been borrowed, pledged to our financial future to save these institutions. Now, the mainstream, blue and red, are going to try to convince you this is all Barack Obama's fault, even though I believe he's completely as guilty as George W. Bush. It's no more his fault than it is Mitt Romney's fault than it is George W. Bush's fault. They're all in the same boat. They will get in front of these cameras, say whatever they got to say in order to placate their so-called constituents in believing that they have a vested interest in their future. And they don't. You absolutely do not. Let's break it down to what it's really going to look like in this country very, very soon. We've already talked multiple times about the millions of rounds of ammunition these obscure government agencies are stockpiling. We've talked about the build-out of the security industrial complex through TSA, Viper teams that are spreading all across this country. Now, understand this. This is when it comes time to pay the piper. A lot of people wondered when we're going to start paying for this fraudulent failure. We pretended everything's okay. You can pretend for a while. We can pretend everything's okay, turn on the printing presses, and pretend we're in recovery, hand out a few trinkets here and there, call it a couple $1 billion, and it sounds like a lot of money, but in truth, when you compare it to the trillions spent in order to save these fraudulent failures, then it's drop in the bucket. But here's a example of things to come. Freddie and Fannie, everybody remembers this name. Freddie and Fannie, they're quasi-government institutions that are now fully 100% backed by the U.S. government, which means you get to deal with their fraudulent failure. Since hundreds of billions of dollars have been pumped into these institutions, and they have a hand in 80% of the mortgages that are issued in this country right now. That's right, 8 out of every 10 mortgage that is issued in this country, Freddie and Fannie has a direct hand in it, meaning you have a responsibility as an American taxpayer or as a citizen of this nation to be on the hook for that failure. But because of this billions and billions of dollars that had to get pumped into these institutions because they bought a bunch of debt from a bunch of Wall Street scumbags, we get to pay for their failure now. Now, inside of Freddie and Fannie, they have some fraudulent individuals who they're calling fraudulent for walking away from their mortgages, otherwise known as strategic defaulting. We've talked about it many times. A lot of people just say, wait a minute. Goldman Sachs can just walk away from something because it's a bad investment. In fact, when they do this, they'll sell insurance on the backside, so they win if it goes up or down, and they'll reap a windfall if it fails, and if it fails too far, they'll just hand it to the American taxpayer, and then they'll take the heat. We've seen that through all these too big to fail institutions. Ergo, too big to fail, they can't fail. You get to fail instead of them. But if you decide as a mortgage holder that wait a minute, my home has fallen 45% in 4 years. I'm now paying for something that I more than likely will never see my investment out of. I'm going to make a business decision, just like these too big to fail institutions would, that it's no longer prudent for me to keep making a monthly payment on something that I'm going to continue to lose money on and will never even break even at this point. Now, when I entered into my mortgage, I made a deal. I will make my payment, and I will get to live in this house. And if I don't make my payment, well, here, you get the house. It's called collateral. You get this property. But that isn't good enough now in this country that is run on controlled economy from on high, when Washington, D.C. is controlling the economy. Because Freddie and Fannie is now a truly government institution, it is the oversight for enforcement is by the FHFA. And they have gun-toting agents that will go out and look into every case that has been foreclosed on. And if they deem that you have walked away because you wanted to strategically default, and then you go to buy another place, guess what? Matter of fact, I'll give you the exact term they want to use. A Treasury official, who of course did not want to be named, said if they find anything that you falsified. Now, again, think of this. We know for a fact hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid in fine by these too big to fail institutions because they did things fraudulently. Now, they don't have to come out and admit they did things fraudulently, but they paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. Then, of course, you get to flip the bill for anyway because you bailed these institutions out. They can create this mess that the globe is in right now. Create this mess by securitizing all these mortgages, have their friends at the rating agencies stamp them AAA, and then break nations financially with these investments. But we're going to spend money now inside of Freddie and Fannie. We're going to have a government agency go after people who strategically defaulted on their homes. And if they had the audacity to strategically default on their home and then go buy another place, well, guess what? The quote is, we're going to lock people up. We're going to put people in jail. A direct quote from the Treasury official that would not be named in this article attached to this video. So how many billions upon billions of dollars are we talking about? We're going to have these mortgage cops come and track down people because they strategically defaulted. How much are we talking? It must be a great sum of money that we have to invest this time and energy into. $1 billion is their estimate. $1 billion is the estimate the government figures people have walked away from mortgages strategically defaulting that they want to go after. $1 billion is literally, really, honestly, completely a rounding error for the fraudulent failure that we were forced to assume by these institutions that are still running policy and still running this country and this planet into the ground. And they're not going to stop. We're going to see this Dodd-Frank garbage legislation come into force, and we already see companies lining up so they can securitize not mortgage debt, but in this case, sovereign debt. It's been a game from the get-go. They're going to put the fraudulent failure of the security, mortgage-backed securities on the back of the people of the world. We're going to see countries fall. We've seen countries fall. We've seen them default. We've seen them lose their sovereignty. And now we're going to see the planet, at least the West, under sovereign debt nightmare, a sovereign debt landmine that's going to go off. We're all going to go down together, and they're going to be sitting there on top of the heap, ready to come in and buy it all up at pennies on the dollar. Stories are attached. That's all I got.